Hello again, Steve here with a few comments about what I've been getting on Facebook or seeing on Facebook and people talking about this sort of what I'm going to call both sides relativism, which takes place when there's real bad behavior on the part of those who you support or we support as human beings. And the example is this bad behavior that's going on in protesting Trump. Some of it is peaceful, a lot of it is peaceful, and there's some hooligans out there who are doing damage and putting out thousands of death threats and rape threats against the Melania Trump and all sorts of things, death threats against Donald Trump, and smashing public property and so on. And you get this sort of sentiment by some people saying, well, in 2008, there was a noose found hanging in Texas somewhere with a message about Barack Obama on it or something like that. And my response to this, yes, there's wingnuts in every side, every place that you want to look, you'll find a wingnut or two, and find lots of them probably. Um, and of course, lots of times we've all run into people who will, if you make the case that, smoking has been proven to not be very good for you, somebody will say, yeah, but I know somebody who was 90 years old and he smoked all of his life. Yes, we get it. They're outliers. There are crazies in every group for sure. But as a general rule, I mean, if you were to say, for example, if you were to make the statement that men are generally taller than women, and if somebody was to say, well, yeah, but I know a woman who's taller than men. Well, we get it. There's outliers, right? And the thing is, though, we can make generalized statements like generally men are taller than women. Generally, smoking isn't great for you. And generally, the left is less mature then. And this plays out because, yes, there are examples of hooligans and so on who put up nonsense after non-arguments and threats of violence and so on after the 2008 elections. But my question is, why can't you find reams of video footage of massive numbers of protests for days on end and violence and police confrontations and so on after the Obama election? And my guess would be because there weren't any. There weren't any major confrontations like this that are going on. It's a scale, right? It's a scale difference, is what it is. And the reason there's a scale difference, I think, is because there's more maturity on the right typically. There's an old saying which goes something like this, what is a conservative? The question is, what is a conservative? And the answer is kind of facetiously, it's a liberal who got married and had children, right? There's a point at which people take responsibility, and if you can tell us when there's polling done, right? Polling of young people, typically they tend to be leftists, young people, and as they get older, they turn over and they go towards the right because there's a maturing process that goes on, which eventually results in personal responsibility, right? I mean, I just love that old picture of that meme that was on Facebook that showed a bunch of old people way back in 1776. It says, give me liberty or give me death, and then the next picture was a band of college students, whatever, with all placards. We want free tuition and everything, and it says, give me free stuff or I'll riot, right? And this is, I think, what we see going on is this, and of course it's whipped up by the enemies of Trump who are in the entrenched government and media by their silence, right? There's no huge amount of condemnation and research into what's actually going on in the mainstream. This is being done by the secondary media and showing, with that during the campaign with James O'Keefe and those people who had to embed themselves in the system to find out who was funding these rioters at the Trump rallies and so on, and so it's being fed by an immature, also thieving class of people, and unfortunately they're the ones who are funding these kids. The kids are their foot soldiers out there in the street to try to destabilize the mature way that the many people who want to vote for more responsibility in governance. They want to destabilize that so they can continue their thieving, because as I've said before, there are two kinds of people really in the world. There's the makers and the takers, right? And you see this in the dichotomy or the polarity of a political system. 80% of the Hillary supporters don't pay any taxes. and 80% of the taxes are paid by the Trump supporters. So it's about makers and takers, and finally there's this pushback of people who want to actually keep some of what they've earned and not just give it over to a bunch of leftists who have proven over and over again to drive the world into endless wars and all kinds of shenanigans that enrich their central core of people, and who, quite frankly, don't give a damn about all they talk about. They don't care about feminists. They don't care about gays. They don't care about Muslims. I mean, if Hillary cared about, or the supporters of Hillary, if they cared about women, why would they vote for Hillary? I mean, Hillary has been aiding and abetting a known sex offender, right, and possibly a pedophile in the name of Bill Clinton. And why would they care? Why would they support her if they cared about Muslims? I mean, under Hillary in her era, in supporting Barack Obama, there's been endless wars in the Middle East, and it turned the Middle East into a scorched earth. Basically, it's a disaster zone, right? And so this is another example of immaturity. It's supporting something that you haven't actually researched into and just going with what everybody says, going with the talking points, going with the propaganda. And this is the result of immaturity. This is what children do. Children listen to their parents, right? And immature people listen to their parents, who is the system, because that's what they rely upon. That's what they rely upon for their food and their goodies and so on, because they are, generally speaking, the takers. They're the ones who don't pay any taxes and rely more on social services and so on. Not always the case, and they're not necessarily poor, of course. There's lots of corporate welfare as well, and institutionalized jobs and so on. And you can often tell who's on what side too, based on what their job is, right? If their job tends to be a government job, they will tend to support more government politics, like Democrats or liberals, right? If they are into free enterprise and producing something for the world, then they will support those, as a general rule. If they don't support anybody at all, like myself, that is, but if they support somebody, they'll support somebody who is more free enterprise and is about to attempt to reduce the amount of government intrusion into their lives. So this was a basic little discussion about how I don't believe there is this both sides relativism, right? Yes, there are hooligans on both sides, for sure. But there is a theme that can be seen, a trend that can be seen, which is that when you have greater or less responsibility, less mature people, you have the greater ability for them to be whipped into a frenzy and go out and do these acts of rioting that we're seeing now, and they tend to be the dependent classes of people, right? They're less enterprising and able to take care of themselves. So therefore, they are, you could say by that extent, that they're less mature people. And I've said this for a long, long time, many years ago actually. Somebody was once asking me, because it was an election in Canada, and there was frustration in this guy's mind how he could convert people, how he could talk to people about the challenges of liberal versus conservative. And that's what I felt at the time too. I said, basically, if you want my opinion, the left represents a less mature cast of people, and the right represent a more mature cast of people, and I'll stick by that. I mean, of course, there's varying degrees. Everybody has, some people vote strategically and so on with a very intelligent gamble on their mind, and they can be very, very intelligent and good, and for a good reason. But I'm talking about generalities here, not specifics, right? In general, there are some very mature people who could be on either side, but they know why they're there if they're mature enough, right? But for those who just go along with the nonsense or the propaganda, and which exists on both sides, don't get me wrong, it's about degrees, is all I'm saying. The left tends to represent less mature people, the right tends to represent more mature people, and that's why you have more rioting on the left, more tendency to have more rioting on the left, and less tendency to have it on the right in this day and age. Unless, of course, there's a real legitimate reason for it, but I don't think we've seen that lately. It's mostly just comparing fairly recent events, the change election of Obama versus the change election of Trump. There's more rioting in this one because I think it involves more immature people who were easily whipped up by the propaganda than in 2008, when you had more mature people who had lost the election, who were less likely to be whipped up by propaganda, which incidentally didn't exist because the propaganda is coming from the leftist media. So it wasn't as much propaganda to whip them up. Nevertheless, even if there was, I don't think they would have been so much. Steve here again, great chatting. Talk again soon. Bye for now.